All right, so let's dive right into a situation that's unfolding like right now.
Yeah.
We're talking about the U.S. completely freezing all military aid to Ukraine.
Huge development, in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, and the U.S. has been Ukraine's, like, biggest supporter.
Oh, absolutely the most powerful backer through all this.
So the sudden stop in aid,
Yeah.
I mean, it got to be sending shockwaves, you know?
Oh, for sure. This has really thrown a wrench into things.
It's almost like they've had the rug pulled out from under them.
Yeah, exactly. And at the worst possible time.
Right, when they're in this desperate fight against, a much larger adversary.
It's a David and Goliath situation, and now David's lost his slingshot, basically.
So what happened? What's the story here?
Well, it all starts in the Oval Office
Okay.
with a face-to-face meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy.
Oh, this sounds juicy.
Oh, yeah, this was not your typical diplomatic, handshake and photo op.
I bet things got a little heated.
Heated is an understatement. Zelenskyy was there, understandably looking for some kind of security guarantee from the U.S.
Right, something to deter Russia.
Exactly, some kind of assurance that, they wouldn't be left out in the cold.
But Trump wasn't having it.
Nope, not at all.
Did he just flat out say no, or?
Oh, it was much more than that.
Okay.
This was like a very public and very personal clash.
Wow.
Trump actually accused Zelenskyy of, gambling with World War III.
For even suggesting that things could escalate?
Yeah, just for bringing it up.
That's a bold move to blame the leader of a country that's being invaded for escalating things.
Yeah, well, it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
J.D. Vance, Trump's deputy, actually called Zelenskyy ungrateful.
Ungrateful.
Yeah, for all the aid the U.S. had already provided.
So this wasn't just like a disagreement about policy. This sounds like a full-blown personality clash.
Absolutely a breakdown in the relationship between these two leaders.
And a very public one at that.
You said it.
So then what happened?
Well, the animosity spilled over onto social media. Yeah, Trump took to Truth Social to vent his frustrations.
And what set him off this time?
Zelenskyy made some comments in London suggesting that a peace deal with Russia was still a long way off.
Ah, I can see why that might rub Trump the wrong way.
Right. He's been pushing for negotiations for a while now.
Exactly. So Zelenskyy basically contradicted him publicly.
And Trump saw this as proof that Zelenskyy wasn't serious about peace.
Okay.
So he posted on Truth Social something to the effect of, "This is the worst thing Zelenskyy could have said, and America won't tolerate it much longer."
Wow. So you have this very public and very personal fight playing out online.
Uh-huh.
And then boom, he gets cut off.
It seems pretty vindictive, right?
It does feel like a punishment.
Especially when you consider that this aid freeze comes after a period where most foreign aid was already on hold.
Well, right back in January,
Hmm.
the Trump administration announced that they were pausing pretty much all foreign aid.
Almost all of it. There were a few exceptions.
Who got special treatment?
Well, Israel and Egypt were still receiving aid, but for the most part, it was a blanket halt.
Right. And I remember the Secretary of State saying that any new aid would have to go through like a thorough review process.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was Ukraine still getting military support throughout all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It's like they were given special treatment, and now even that's been revoked.
And without any warning.
Yeah, so we're left wondering what changed. Why this sudden about-face?
It's a real head-scratcher.
Especially since Ukraine was considered important enough to be exempt from that initial aid freeze.
It's a puzzle with some pretty high stakes.
Right, because the consequences of this aid freeze for Ukraine, I mean, they could be devastating.
Oh, absolutely. Their military relies heavily on U.S. equipment and training.
So this sudden halt throws their whole defense strategy into question.
Exactly, and we have to wonder what kind of message this sends to Russia.
Right. Are they seeing this as a sign of weakness?
It's definitely emboldening them.
Yeah, giving them the opportunity to push harder.
Russia has been working to undermine Western support for Ukraine for months.
Right.
And this is a major victory for them.
Even if it was unintentional.
Exactly. So we're left with this dramatic meeting, the public feud, the sudden aid freeze, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
So where do we go from here?
Well, we need to look at the possible explanations for Trump's actions.
Is this a strategic move, or is it driven by something else entirely?
That's what we'll explore next. We need to consider the potential motivations, the possible outcomes, and the impact this could have on the whole region, not just Ukraine.
So buckle up, folks. It's about to get even more complicated.
Can you say that again?
But that's why we're here, right?
To make sense of it all.
To dive deep into the story and figure out what's really going on.
That's our mission.
So stick with us as we unravel this tangled web of geopolitics.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So we know this aid freeze is a big deal, and the timing is, like you said, suspicious. But let's try to understand Trump's perspective here. What could his motivation be for taking such drastic action?
Well, one theory is that it's a pressure tactic, a high-stakes gamble.
Okay.
Trump has said many times that he believes that the continued U.S. aid is actually discouraging Zelenskyy from pursuing peace.
So he thinks cutting off the support will force Zelenskyy to the negotiating table ready to make some concessions.
That's the idea.
But is that a fair assessment of Zelenskyy's position?
It's tough to say. I mean, he's leading a country that's under attack.
Right.
He has to balance the need for peace with the need to protect his people and his nation's sovereignty.
It's not as simple as just giving in to pressure from Trump.
No, definitely not.
And let's not forget, Zelenskyy has repeatedly said that he's open to negotiations, he's not ruling out a peaceful resolution, but he's also not going to just surrender to appease Trump or Russia.
Exactly, and that's what makes this situation so volatile.
We've got two strong-willed leaders, each with their own agenda and their own perception of what needs to happen.
And caught in the middle is the fate of Ukraine hanging in the balance.
But is forcing negotiations the only possible explanation for this aid freeze you mentioned earlier? That this could signal a broader shift in U.S. foreign policy?
Right, that's another possibility. We can't rule out the fact that this could be a sign that Trump intends to disengage from Ukraine completely.
Which would be a huge departure from the U.S.'s traditional role as, a defender of democracy and a supporter of its allies.
And absolutely a major shift in U.S. foreign policy.
And if the U.S. does pull back, who fills that void? The implications for the region, even the world, are pretty concerning.
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
A U.S. withdrawal would be a huge win for Russia.
Oh, yeah. They'd be emboldened to exert even more influence in the region.
And it could destabilize the whole area, creating a power vacuum that, other actors with maybe not so noble intentions might try to exploit.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
One decision seemingly isolated triggers a cascade of consequences that reshape the global landscape.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've looked at the potential motivations behind Trump's actions. But what about Zelenskyy? How's he handling this incredibly challenging situation? I mean, he's essentially been told, show us you're serious about peace or you're on your own.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. He desperately needs that U.S. support, but he can't be seen as caving to pressure or compromising Ukraine's interests.
It's a delicate balancing act.
For sure, he's walking a tightrope.
How does he even approach this? Does he try to appease Trump? Or does he double down on his calls for a strong international response to Russian aggression?
He's got to find a way to do both.
To play both sides.
He needs to maintain a strong stance against Russia while also signaling that he's willing to negotiate, all while trying to reassure his people and rally international support.
It's a high-stakes game of diplomacy with very little room for error.
You got it.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of a real war with real lives at stake. It's not just a political chess game.
Yeah.
The human cost of this conflict is immense.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the political maneuvering, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there are real people in Ukraine facing the daily realities of war displacement, fear. Their lives are directly impacted by the decisions being made in Washington and Kyiv.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. So as we watch this situation unfold, what should we be paying attention to? What are the signs that might tell us where things are headed?
I think it's important to watch for any signals of compromise or escalation from either side. Are there subtle shifts in rhetoric? Are there back-channel diplomatic efforts happening that we're not aware of? Any movement, even slight, could be an indication of what's to come.
And what about the reactions from other global powers? Are we seeing any signs of who might be stepping up to fill the void or maybe trying to mediate the situation?
Yeah, the international response will be very telling. Are we going to see a united front in support of Ukraine, or will there be fractures and divisions that Russia can exploit? The actions of other countries will give us valuable insights into how this might play out.
This all feels very precarious, like we're on the edge of a precipice, and the decisions made in the coming days and weeks could have ripple effects for years to come.
It's a pivotal moment not just for Ukraine and the U.S., but for the global order as a whole. It's a reminder that personal relationships, political calculations, and the pursuit of power can have profound consequences shaping the destinies of nations and the lives of millions. We need to pay close attention and try to understand the complexities of the situation because the stakes couldn't be higher.
Okay, so we're back, and things between the U.S. and Ukraine, they're still really tense.
Yeah, the situation hasn't gotten any less complicated.
We left off talking about Zelensky's, really tough position.
Right, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Needing U.S. support to defend against Russia, but also facing this pressure to, make concessions that he might not be ready to make.
It's like he's being asked to juggle chainsaws while walking a tightrope blindfolded.
Yeah, that's about right. So let's think about this for a second. What does a real commitment to peace actually look like? I mean, is it a ceasefire? Is it giving up territory? Or is it something else entirely?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And how does Zelenskyy balance any of those options with what his people want?
Right, because they're understandably wary of, giving in to an
Of
aggressive.
course, nobody wants to reward bad behavior.
So it's a delicate situation. And it seems like the longer this impasse drags on, the more dangerous it becomes, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole region.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes just keep getting higher.
Because, like we said before, a potential U.S. withdrawal creates this vacuum that other actors might be all too happy to fill.
And those actors might not have the best intentions for Ukraine.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind as this all unfolds?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that this isn't just about Trump and Zelenskyy. This is about the future of Ukraine,
Yeah.
the stability of Europe, and the balance of power in the world.
It's a reminder that actions have consequences. Sometimes those consequences can be far-reaching and totally unpredictable.
Exactly. We've seen how a personal clash between two leaders, a few angry social media posts, and a sudden policy change can have a ripple effect across the entire globe.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we live in a complex and interconnected world where even events that seem isolated can have a huge impact.
And as we move forward, it's crucial to stay informed, stay engaged, and think critically about the information we come across. This situation demands our attention, our understanding, and our willingness to really grapple with the complexities of the world we live in.
This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. We've explored the personalities involved, the historical context, and the potential consequences of this aid freeze. It's clear that there are more questions than answers right now, but by understanding the forces at play, we can start to make sense of this whole tangled web of geopolitics.
And as the story continues to unfold, we encourage you to keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep. The more we understand about the world around us, the better equipped we'll be to handle its challenges.
This has been really eye-opening, and I have a feeling we'll be talking about this again soon. But for now, we'll leave you with this thought. If the U.S. does step back from its role as a global leader who will step in to fill the void, and what will that mean for international relations and the balance of power in the world?
Yeah.
Those are some big questions worth thinking about, and we encourage you to keep exploring them as this story develops. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.